today, as we continue to navigate through this plague, we'll call it, we see financial, social, and the spiritual impact. I was telling some folks that one of the silver linings, I guess, of this is that we have put this on YouTube or uplinked it, and Facebook. And so different folks, I get a note every week from a sister in Columbus that says, hey, I watched your service. And so we're glad that others are taking advantage of that approach. But we much rather have you here, even in your car, and we trust that as it gets a little warmer, we can put our lawn chairs out on the lawn, keep your social distancing, and just enjoy God's sanctuary. But in all these things, we're getting a snapshot, if you will, of our culture. Our culture. And the word itself, culture, can be a big word, and it encompasses many things. But once you understand the culture of a people, you're very likely to understand the people. Everything that makes our nation, anyway, is wrapped up in our culture. We see it as unique from cultures around the world. We in the United States have long defined boundaries with Canada and Mexico, where people that live in our country, it has an effect. And where you are, whether you're living in the mountains, you're living along the coasts, or in the desert, that has an effect on your own local culture. Aside from the land in our country, a language is a very important component of our culture. And every country in the world has a primary language. Many countries have sub-languages and different dialects, but they all decide upon a common primary language to speak in and to do their business in banking. Language is a key, if you will, to unity. And I trust as I talk about culture, we recognize being part of Jesus' culture, the kingdom culture, where language is a key to our unity with this kingdom. Also, a key factor, we want to learn to speak the language. And it's funny, I talk with our youth, and some of the terms I used before are no longer current today. And they remind me that that's not in anymore. So I have to get caught up with the current language. We also know that all countries have their own set of laws that ensures peace, ensures order for its citizens. No laws, and you have chaos. And I know that's being challenged even with the plague and some of the orders that have come down from different states. And people are beginning to ask themselves, well, what are our laws? What do we abide by, and how far do we go? The laws of a nation do reflect its culture as well. Nations and its cultures also have specific symbols. For us in the United States, one of our most familiar symbols of our culture is the flag. And we're approaching 4th of July and times when we recognize the history, the sacrifice, the suffering, and the triumphs that went behind establishing that symbol. And we have a loyalty, and we're inspired by it these days. We know in our country we have a unique constitution, and that affects our culture. It's basically a contract. I know there's a school up north called Hillsdale College that each of their students before they graduate have to know the Constitution well. And there are even pocket constitutions that you could carry along. I think we would do well to grab a hold of that and begin to look at this contract between a country and its people. This contains laws and documents. Another thing that a country, a nation has very uniquely are our moral codes. That makes up our culture. These morals embody our standards under which people agree to live. How to, in fact, govern ourselves. Some are written and some are unwritten moral codes. The written ones are expressed, a lot of them, through our laws, but the unwritten moral codes are just as significant, passed on through tradition, customs. Let me give you some examples. Respect each other's property. Don't bear false witness in court. Don't steal. Show respect for elders and leaders. All part of this moral code, and as you may have noticed, many derived from the Bible itself. Another common characteristic of cultures are its shared values. To run effectively a country and better, people have to have shared values, such as life, freedom, self-determination, and peace. Those are values that we have throughout our country, and we want folks to respect those as our values and to share those values. And so every nation, including ours, and this culture develops our own customs. Our customs are derived from our values. Customs differentiate in many parts, even of our own country, with food, with manners. I know once you go south of the Mason-Dixon line, there are a lot of folks that will greet you. Yes, sir. No, sir. Yes, ma'am. No, ma'am. In general, these customs are consistent throughout our country. Finally, we see what we are calling our social norms, which are definitely rapidly changing in our own country, with greater impact, in fact, than customs have. Social norms are standards of speech. As you know, they're being tested in our culture with gender classification or reclassification. In essence, thought, behaviors which are accepted by a wide majority who determine what is right, what is proper. You violate a custom, people might think that you're a bit eccentric. But if you violate a social norm, you risk being reprimanded. So these are all part of our culture. But what is culture by definition? Here it is, and I quote, "Culture is the act of developing the intellectual and moral faculties through education, parental care, and training." Parents and teachers are in this process together of co-teaching the elements of our culture through modeling and through teaching. And as our children learn these cultural elements, they begin to internalize and live them out. These cultural norms in their speech, in their values. In a phrase, we all come to think like the environment in which we grow up in. None of us is born with a culture, but we're born into a culture, and that is a significant truth. For most of us, I trust and pray, all of us will one day discover the kingdom of heaven, where we are born anew, where we are born again and become citizens of God's kingdom. Now, we may have lived in our own present culture for 10, 20, 30 years before we're introduced to being citizens of heaven and the kingdom culture. That's where the challenge really begins. After learning years of certain ways to think, we suddenly find ourselves in a whole new culture with lots of things to learn, and I dare say lots of things to unlearn. There's the problem or the challenge. We can't get rid of the old culture, and we have to examine where is the present culture I'm living in conflicting with the new heavenly culture that I'm learning about. We have, in essence, now dual citizenship.